My name is Terry Toronis. I'm a features writer for the Colorado Springs Gazette. Thank you for taking time to talk with us today.
Excellent. Thanks for your interest.
Of course. My first question is on the show. As I'm astounded as I'm watching, just because of the visual intensity of it, and it seems to be a mix of live action, green screen, and you kind of walking through certain areas. What can you kind of give us a background on how the film is, the show is produced, so that obviously you're on location for some things. The Ship of the Imagination looks like green screen, but on a set. How does all this come together to form a show?
Well, first, all the shots on Saturn's moons, those were real. I was actually there. It was so there were many location shoots, and for locations where, so now we're just talking about actual places, accessible places. Many location shoots. There were some locations that, because of cost or just sort of production challenges, were done via green screen. And the way you do that is you send a camera crew to the location where I would be standing, and they take very high resolution video of the region, including the terrain and the backdrop, and the exact orientation of the sun is noted. Then we in studio, and then they come back. So that's way cheaper than shipping everybody there. And then they come back with these high resolution video images, such as what would have been filmed if I were there. So now all you have to do is put me in this high resolution image. And then in a few cases, they build the foreground, and I'd be on the foreground, and that would blend seamlessly into the background. And if you look at older green screen attempts from maybe a few decades ago, you kind of knew it was fake, but you couldn't quite put your finger on why. And a lot of that had to do with your brain figuring out that your brain does calculations even though you're not aware of it. Your brain is figuring, wait a minute, the sun angle isn't matched, or you're lit up here, but the sun is over there, and all of a sudden you're taken out of the image. So we have a very elaborate, well, it looked elaborate to me. Maybe it's just commonplace for these folks, for the visual effects folks, but the exact angle of the sun is recorded, as well as the color temperature of the sun, because as the sun gets lower in the sky, its color changes, and you want to make note of that. So then when I'm put in the scene, I'm exactly lit by the proper illumination of the stage lights that resemble the sunlight that's otherwise in that scene. So I forgot the exact fraction, maybe a third of the places we could have gone to and didn't are green screened, and the rest are real. And so for me, that's a good combination, because it shows frugality when you need it to, but doesn't rob the viewer of the full expanse of what could be an on-location shoot, or the cast or crew. So as far as the places that are not, you don't want to sensibly visit, like black holes, the ship goes up to colliding black holes and dives into underwater. This is fully done on computer graphics, and we have the best in the business. So the person working on this was head of the visual effects guild. All right, and these are people who work on $100 and $200 million films, and part of it, one of the great legacies of Cosmos is, or features of Cosmos, is that people know what it is and they care about it, and they'll bring their very high-level expertise that normally is given onto high-budget movies to this project. Because I think in the end they know and they care about the mission statement that is represented in the storytelling. So that's how that is. And the green screen, I'm in the Ship of the Imagination. There's a 50-foot green screen outside the window. And he came up and he'll point with a laser in one spot and say, okay, a star just blew up right there. Go. Okay. Now I'm good with blown up stars because I'm an astrophysicist, so I can just picture all that in my head. So all the cosmic scenes were actually trivial for me to experience because I think about them all the time, and I imagine myself traveling among them in my dreams. It's only when we go to these other, when inside a volcano or face to face with a worm, because the ship travels not only in space but in time and in size. So another one, I have to confront a worm, a terrifying-looking worm, and he says, go. And I said, no, I need a visual reference for this, please. So I see the visual references that they're working from, and that way I can, because I'm not an actor, so I have to learn how to pretend I'm looking at it. And so that's how all that came together. But I'm actually very happy with the final product. And you're right, it's a visually stunning, and it's seamlessly blended. So we go to, we're in the Netherlands just as we are in a bottom of the ocean in Enceladus, one of Saturn's moons. And one last thing I'll tell you, a minor bit of frustration for me, and I understood why, but it was just I live in sightline of the Brooklyn Bridge in Lower Manhattan, New York City. And we green screened that. We were all because we couldn't ship everybody and close off the Brooklyn Bridge at night when we were doing this, and so we just did it. We sent the video folks, and they came back. And so I just this is my neighborhood, this is my neighborhood. But they set it up, and I have a thing I lean on, the green screen railing, which matches the railing in the actual Brooklyn Bridge, and cars are going by, and bicyclists are riding by. There I am. So, but you're not given reason to think it's a green screen because it's obviously otherwise a very accessible place. And so at the end, we don't need anybody to be worried about it or thinking about it. Let the whole thing run seamlessly.
Thanks very, so much, for your very detailed answer.
Mm-hmm. Colleen, Nerd Alert News.
Hi, thanks for introducing me. Hi, this is Colleen with Nerd Alert News. And Neil, thank you so much for taking time out.
Sure, and great name for a news, by the way.
Yeah, I have a staff of writers. We're all nerds, and I can tell you we're excited to hear this interview.
Mm-hmm.
So my question for you is that I want to know that after these few seasons, do you still have the same excitement that you did from the beginning? I mean, what a thrill to carry on Carl Sagan's legacy. And I know it's been such a thrill for you because I know you actually met him. So how's the energy and the excitement level? Is it still just as exciting as it was when you first started?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I can only comment on what happened rather than what it could be. So the reason why I say that is this is, if you count them all, this is the third season of Cosmos, first in 1980. Then 34 years later comes the next one. Then 6 years later comes the next one. So we're doing better, right? 6 years instead of 34. But nowadays people think of these things as seasons. When is the next season coming? No one said when the first Cosmos aired, when is the next season? That was not a thought. In 1980, it was viewed as a one-off documentary, multi-part documentary. I mean, you didn't go to who's the guy that did the Civil War series for PBS? You don't go to him and say, when's the next season of Civil War coming? That's just not how you do that. But that's the expectation today. And fortunately, Ann Druyan, who is hugely creative, boundlessly creative, in the middle of an expanding universe, the question of another season, even beyond this, would be a matter of, does she have the energy? Not do any of the rest of us have the energy. Does she have the energy to come up with all of the stories of these historical figures? Because she's not only, as you've figured out by now, presumably, she's not only hyper-scientifically literate, though she's not a scientist. She's scientifically literate in all the ways one needs to be. And she's emotionally literate. So she is our storyteller. And that's what distinguishes, and by the way, she's that special sauce that is shared among all three cosmoses, right? She co-wrote all three of them. And that's what they have in common. That's why Cosmos doesn't settle on you as a normal documentary. It enters you in ways that science programming typically does not. You end up feeling for the characters. You end up being motivated to rise up with your newly acquired scientific insights and bring it to bear on making a better world. And this one is specifically that, Cosmos Possible World. Presumably you've seen at least one or two of the episodes thus far. And in that regard, there is no shortage, first, of scientific content, because the universe is vast, but there's no shortage of issues and topics that are relevant to our times. And so I had no less energy for the third one as I did for the second one, as I experienced for the first one, watching Carl Sagan. The real question would be, could we actually pull this off every year? And for me, I don't know, because the effort is so huge and the investment of time and energy. And so had this been every year and you asked me that, I would have said, boy, I was exhausted by the end. I don't know if I can do another one for another 10 years. But that's not what happened. 6 years after 34 years. So I'd spoken to Anne, and she's talking about a fourth season. So I said, okay, if she's got the end, she's older than all of us. If she's got that energy, who am I to say I don't?
That's a fabulous answer. I'm really glad it might be a fourth season.
One final point about that. I had always imagined, after my first season, I thought, wouldn't it be cool if you could hand this off to a next generation for every iteration of Cosmos, kind of like Doctor Who. There's another, Time Lord comes in, and so I'm completely open to that as a statement that you keep handing this to the next generation of searchers, of scientists, and so we'll see. We'll see how all this Anne's energy shakes out, and also we'll see how much the world need another Cosmos. Is there some other issue? In 1980, the Cold War loomed heavy as we were all held hostage to the conflict of political ideologies. And now we have other challenges, of course. In 5 years, what challenges will we confront then? Oh my gosh, or 10 years, in 3 years. So Cosmos is at its best a way to flow science through the greatest challenges of the day and offer signs of hope that we can go into the future as better shepherds of civilization than we have been.
Well, thank you for doing that. And yes, the world needs that.
Dana Abercrombie from Koalition, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, hi. Thank you so much. I was wondering, how heavily involved are you in the concept of each season of the show?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I carry 3 titles. The obvious one is host of the show. I'm also narrator, which makes sense since I'm also the host, although not all programs are that way. And that is not all productions in the world are that way, but it is in this case. And I'm executive science editor. And the way this unfolds is Anne thinks up topics that she feels would make a good story or story arc, and she has more topics than what are ultimately put into production, which is a good problem. All right, because then you can cherry pick and get the best stories and by the way, not all the best stories lend themselves to video storytelling. So there are other filters that get invoked. Once those stories are conceived, then we bring together a panel of scientists, because while I am an astrophysicist, one of the great contributions of Cosmos is how seamlessly it blends traditionally separate sciences. You come through school and you have your biology book and then your chemistry book, and it's a different teacher, a different professor, and it's a different book, and so we think of them as these stovepipe channels through nature, but of course nature doesn't distinguish one from the other at all. It is a complete blend, and as Cosmos tells stories, it is a complete blend of geology and biology and chemistry and physics and astrophysics, and especially in this one, engineering, because we explore engineering solutions to our modern challenges. So the committee comes together and explores whether the science that has been suggested in the storyline is accurate. Or Anne might have read something on a frontier. Is that just a fringe idea, or is it mainstream, or is it just a fun idea, but there's nothing really against it, like wormholes? Wormholes are real. They're mathematically real. We just don't know how to make one. So So how would you fold that into a story? You want to be honest about how unreachable it is technologically, even if you are candid about the fact that the science can take you there perhaps one day. So it goes through that filter, and some stories are modified, others are removed because they're based on a scientific principle that has been overturned or not sufficiently founded to base an important element of the story on. And okay, so then all of that get readjusted. Then I see the scripts, and I'm the last gate of what would occur. And so, because between the script and what comes out of my mouth, and I'll say, and this doesn't work, or this doesn't make sense, or this doesn't, and we go back, and something gets adjusted or not, or gets removed or enhanced. There are other ways, just as an example. As an editor, it's not just what you take out; it's what you can add. So, for example, there's in a case where a phenomenon is being portrayed, and I say, this phenomenon is even greater than you are capturing here in this story. Right? The explosion is more significant, or it lasts longer and gives you more time to tell the story. And so adjustments had been made because the science, in fact, enabled the story to be stronger than it otherwise would have been. And so that's where I come in. So I'm not there at the beginning of it. I'm there sort of middle towards the end, and especially at the end.
Thank you so much. Nick Brady from Tech News World.
Oh, I want to add one other thing.
Oh, sure.
Sorry. Just one other thing. You guys might know because you write about this stuff, but the public generally doesn't know, I don't think, that when you see a credit for who wrote a story that you see on television, that's a very different kind of writing that goes on when you write a book. And at the risk of stating the obvious, right, I write books. That's what I do. But when I'm writing a book, I'm not imagining how that would become a video. It's living entirely in the words and sentences that I'm putting to page. When you write for television or for movies, the writer is not only conceiving of words, they're also imagining the set design. What would happen? They're not designing it, but they're imagining what it could look like or should look like. And so that is a whole other level of creative writing than what goes on if one is simply writing a book. And that's what Anne lives and thinks visually and emotionally. And so, as I've said earlier, she's the secret sauce that makes Cosmos Cosmos and not just another documentary.
Thank you so much. Mick Brady, if you want to ask your question. Mick is from Tech News World.
Hi, Neil. Great to connect with you today.
Hello.
My question concerns your mention of a cosmic telescope in Cosmos. You suggest that you wondered why we haven't yet built one, and that we could use it to view the early Voyagers setting sail thousands of years ago. So I'm wondering just how much detail a cosmic telescope could provide and how it might solve some of the planet's big riddles and help us solve big problems that we face today, like perhaps climate change. And also, what would it take to build one?
That's all you're asking. Okay. So the statement that I don't know why we haven't built one yet is a simple expression of it does not involve yet to be invented technology. That's all I'm communicating there. The expense could be huge. I mean, even in the billions. But the challenges, the technological and engineering challenges and scientific challenges are not what is in our way. Hence, I get to push you a little in the direction of exploration and say, I don't know why we haven't done this. The Alcubierre drive, which is a warp drive, I can't say, I don't know why we haven't done this yet, because it's still, the physics is working, but the technology is still a bit of science fiction. So we take great pains, and I hope successful. I hope we've accomplished successfully to distinguish what is real and doable, what is real but dreamy, and what is dreamy and maybe one day, an unforeseeable future, will get it done. In the moment, I don't see how a cosmic telescope would inform our Earth circumstances regarding climate change, other than to get images of distant exoplanets. You see, as long as you are just a single planet in your database, you don't know what's unusual or what's common. You can't generalize about it because it's the curse of the single example. So you know, a way to think about this is if you have only ever seen goldfish swimming in water, and you try to hypothesize about what you might find if you look in other waters, you would say it would be small and gold-colored and, you know, with a little fertile tail. And then you go in and you see other things that kind of look like a goldfish because they swim, but they're not gold. And so you say, oh, so then you generalize beyond the goldfish single example. Then you keep looking and say, wait a minute, there are crabs, and there's like coral, and there's octopus that doesn't even have a spine. And then all of a sudden, you have a broader understanding of what life is simply by broadening your database. So right now we know other planets exist, but we have not looked down on their surface. There's detail missing. We don't have evidence of life elsewhere. If we look with a cosmic telescope and we'd be able to have resolution sufficient for observing surface features of other planets, like we're in orbit around Earth, that is resolution such as what we get when we're just a few hundred miles above Earth looking down, then we'd be able to say, oh, okay, there are other planets that survive it this way and not that way, and this other planet has life, and look what they've built, and look what they've done. And all you can say, oh, now we have a new perspective on how to handle our problems here. That's a way to use a cosmic telescope to address challenges we're facing here on Earth. My first thought is we get to see stuff we've never seen before. And anytime you do that, you learn. Anytime you have access to regimes of data that no one before you ever had, you learn something. And I have an obscure example. My high school girlfriend, we went to the same college. She got glasses very late, like her sophomore year of college in life. Okay, she had always apparently had slightly fuzzy vision at a distance, not close up. She could read, and only first time got glasses in her sophomore year. And she puts them on, and we're sitting down, like walking back to the dorms, and she's noticing, wow, the grass has blades of grass in it. Like, it's not just a green carpet. It's actually made of things that are individually green. Now, she knew this intellectually, but never visually experienced it. And all of a sudden, the grass became this intriguing place to probe further. So that's a simple case of your resolution increasing, bringing you into a whole other way of thinking and seeing the world. And for us, it would be a whole other way of thinking about and seeing the universe. So that's a cosmic telescope for it.
Wow. So if I understand you correctly, its value would be less in looking in great detail at Earth's history and more in looking in greater detail at the cosmos itself.
Yes, precisely.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you. Lauren Barrick from GreerBrain, if you want to ask your question, please.
Hi. Thank you, Dr. Tyson. I wanted to ask
wait, just one thing. I just realized something. Back to the previous. Sorry to interrupt. Back to the previous question. So I think I understand. There's a confusion there. The confusion is if another civilization had built a cosmic telescope, and let's say they're 65 million light years from us, and they look back at Earth, they would see Earth not as we are today, but as we were 65 million years ago. In fact, they would witness the extinction of the dinosaur because that light would only just now be reaching them, and they'd have the resolution to watch that happen. So a cosmic telescope would never see the history of the Earth because that ship sailed. That light has already passed and is on its way out into the universe. We'd be able to see the past of other civilizations that are not only in our galaxy but in other galaxies.
So we wouldn't really view the early Voyager setting sail.
No, not of our own, but other other civilizations would be able to see that. Yes, depending on what distance they are. Yeah, and that light would just now be reaching them. Just sorry I wasn't clear about that when I was around.
Oh, thank you very much. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Lauren, we're ready for your next question.
Okay, great. Thank you. Dr. Tyson, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned that you said this is, in effect, the third season of Cosmos. So I'm going to ask you if, in fact, the fourth season takes another 40 years to come forward.
I'll be 100 and whatever years old, and I'm just,
okay.
No.
But it's passed along, as you had suggested, to the next, the next scientist or the next storyteller. What kind of stories 40 years from now could you imagine would be told? What possible worlds would we be talking about in 2060?
Yeah, so I'd like to think, and I'm just making this up now, but in 2060, see, we can't just keep growing the population of the Earth without either becoming a multi-planet species or, stopping. Let me start that again. There are two things going on. The population is growing because of the babies that are being formed, but also because we're living longer. All right. So these are two forces in the rate equations. There's how many new humans are arriving, how many old humans are leaving. And so if we discover the gene for aging, whatever that involves, and then we can live not only to 100 or 150, but to 200, and with a quality of life that you'd want to have, that would be devastating to Earth's resources unless we stopped having babies. It would be devastating. No one would die. So the population would start growing exponentially, more exponentially than it has already. So we need solutions to that. So in 40 years, if there's the fourth one is that when that arrives, I'm expecting that we would become a multi-planet species. I'm expecting that to do that, we're not living in a habitat module on Mars. No, that we have perfected geoengineering, terraformed Mars, and turned Mars into Earth. And there are people who want to do that as Plan B, Earth 2.0, in case we trash Earth and Earth becomes unlivable through climate change or whatever else. And my reply to that is, if we have the power of geoengineering to turn Mars into Earth, then of course we have the power of geoengineering to turn Earth back into Earth. So there's not going to be, let's all go to this other new haven that we just made. No, we'll have two havens, Earth and Mars. And then we'd have to find ways to mine asteroids for their natural resources, because the planets on which you live will not be the only places you will need to obtain them. And I have said many times, I think the first trillionaire in the world will be the first person to explore of asteroids. So I can imagine a cosmos in 2060 that is all about stuff we're doing on the planets and moons in the solar system, and then imagining travel to other star systems, possibly populating those as well, and with real thoughts about turning the galaxy into a backyard for. That's what I can imagine. And by the way, there'll be advances in engineering, biology, chemistry, physics that we can reach to solve emergent problems. I foresee that. I foresee virus-resistant variants on what we are as humans. Just complete virally resistant. Why not? I can see what else? I'm not a sci-fi guy. I mean, I love sci-fi, but I don't have that creativity. Just imagine problems that confront us today. For example, go back 100 years ago. I did this on Colbert. Colbert asked me, what problems do I foresee in the next century? And my answer to him was, the biggest problems I foresee are the ones we don't even know yet are problems. That's what I foresee. And why do I say that? Because the problems we list today were undreamt of 100 years ago. You go back to the year 1900, what's everybody worrying about? We'll run out of food for the growing population, not knowing that science will multiply the productivity of farming by factors of 10. No one saw that coming, okay? And nor is it talked about much because people don't want to hear the word science attached to their food supplies. But that's why we're feeding 7 billion people today. And anyone starving is not starving because there's a shortage of food. They're starving because politics prevents the distribution of food, and whatever cultural inequities prevent that. It's not because the world doesn't have enough food. What else was happening 100 years ago? People were afraid of tuberculosis. Oh my gosh, okay? And other things, polio. That's what people were preoccupied by. And now those are solved problems. And so going forward, I wonder what problems we have yet to discover that create existential risks for us, and that's what that cosmos.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Tali had to jump on.
It's sorry to sound like I was screaming, but you got me all wound up there. Okay.
Sajida, would you ask your some comic speak?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, Dr. Neil. I'm Sajida Ayub from Comics Beat.
Excellent.
So my question is, did you make any suggestions for the show, and did any of them get incorporated? I know you're very humorous, and there must have something happened on the set which blew your mind, and you thought that should be in the show. And did you have any behind the scenes?
Yeah, that would have any suggestions I had happened before I'm on set. They happen at the point where I'm reviewing the scripts, and there's an interesting scene that had to be completely changed because I found an error in a calculation and an assumption that was made for that scene. There were others as well, but this one is particularly interesting that I'll share with you. And in fact, it was episode 1, actually, which has already aired here in the United States last week. So there, Enceladus, one of the moons of Saturn, has a liquid ocean beneath an icy surface, and energy is pumped into Enceladus from the gravitational stresses of its orbit around Saturn. That's why it's a liquid ocean. Otherwise, it's so far away from the sun, the whole moon would be completely frozen were it not for this source of energy. Well, there are cracks in the surface of Enceladus, and there are pressures that build up from that heat, and the water can spew forth. The best example we have for this are geysers. It spews forth, and it spews forth in an atomized way in much what happens on a ski slope where they're artificially generating snow. Once it springs forth, the water droplets crystallize and make snowflakes, and then they fall back down. So Anne was intrigued by the fact that Enceladus, which has a very low gravity, it's just a moon, that you might have these snowflakes trending, and that would make an interesting visual effect. So there's an entire section of that episode that is sort of basking in the otherworldliness of this phenomenon. And so this is where I come in as sort of the last gate. And I looked at the script, I looked at the scene descriptions, I looked at what the visual effects people were going to be handed, and I said, this doesn't sound right. I ran some calculations. And so here was the problem. The problem is snowflakes on Earth fall slowly, okay? They're not meteors coming down. They fall slowly because they're moving through the air. And the air creates this huge resistance. So if you calculate how fast snowflakes would be falling on Enceladus that you just dropped, they wouldn't be falling much slower than the snowflakes on Earth. So you can't just create this whole phenomenon and then declare that it's going to feel otherworldly compared to Earth. But worse than that, it turns out, because there's no air, I don't know how much physics you remember from high school or from college if you ever took physics.
Yeah,
but
I'm an engineer.
Okay. If there is no air resistance, then the snowflake will hit the ground at the same speed that the water spewed upwards that came out of the geyser. So that, in fact, if this comes out of the geyser at 100 miles an hour, the snowflake is going to fall past you at 100 miles an hour coming down because it's just a projectile that's symmetric with what went up. So that's yet another layer of calculation to show that you can't show the scene in the way that had been imagined. So a whole visual effects scene got removed, or rather, it hadn't been made yet, but it was the instructions were there to create the scene, and it got recast just to talk about these jets going up and down without basking in what would have been a really beautiful otherworldly scene. But the physics wouldn't allow the scene as it was originally conceived. So that's an example of something that happened very late. Like that happened like a day, 2 days before we were going to film and utter the words of the slow-moving snowflakes. Now, just so you know all the elements of this, there are scenes that we filmed and would later dig up more results or find out that the science had shifted since the scene was filmed. And the way you fix that, you don't set up, you don't rehire everybody and just no. You do a handoff from what I said to camera to what I would then say in narration. And then you change the scene in narration. You change the scene that I narrate and graft that onto the parts that were done to camera that remain intact. And that happens seamlessly. You would never know how often that happened watching the final product.
Nice.
That's aspects of this and how that unfolds. Another thing is I had shared with Anne the fact that because I'm old enough to have done this and remember it, I attended the 1964 New York World's Fair. I was a young kid, but I remember it. I remember it. And Carl Sagan was about the same age as I was when he visited the 1939 World. So this is information handed to Anne, who then says, let's ride this World's Fair theme. And the entire 13th episode, which is my personal favorite, is an imagined World's Fair from the year 2039 and capturing the mood and the future thinking and the hopefulness that World's Fairs tend to bring upon the world. So that's a piece where and my visit to the World's Fair is retold, and we have actors playing me as a 6-year-old kid, and someone playing my mother and my father and my brother and my sister in a stroller. So there's like crackly footage reenacted of them walking through the fairgrounds of the World's Fair.
Amazing. Wow, thank you for sharing that, Dr. Neil.
Sure.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Sonia, would you like to close us out for this round here?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. Hi, Neil. I'm with the Museum of Moving Images publication, Sloan Science and Film.
Excellent.
And yeah, I think that this is represented in the show and also in the range of answers you've had to the questions, which is just sort of an obvious thing that Cosmos is not only about space, but it's also about Earth. And I am just wondering how you, maybe less from a screenwriting or storytelling perspective, but more related to maybe the mission of the show, think about that balance?
Yeah, so consider that as an astrophysicist, to me, Earth is not a place where you live, where I live. Of course it is that, but that's not how I think about it. I think about it as a planet, one of 8, get over it, 8 planets. Pluto's not coming back. 8 planets in the solar system. And our sun, you think of it as something that warms your day. I think of it as just one of 100 billion suns in the galaxy, Milky Way galaxy. And people who look up at the night sky, cross the dome, and I look at the Milky Way as one of 100 billion galaxies. So only with that outlook do you arrive at cosmic perspective. And a cosmic perspective, a subset of which astronauts have called the overview effect, is something that is not unique to the astrophysical sciences. You can also get a cosmic perspective from chemistry upon learning that the chemistry of molecules on Earth repeats on other planets when we look at the spectrum of other places in the galaxy. Other planets in our own solar system and other star systems in the galaxy, you see the same chemical signatures that are there. It's like, whoa, so what's going on here is not unique. And then you look at biology, and you find out that we're made of the most common elements in the universe. So whatever happened here on Earth managed to be rather expeditious about it. Is that the right word? Rather, what happens with just something? So Earth was highly exploitive of the ingredients it had available to it to go from organic molecule to self-replicating life. So Earth is there not only to step away from it and then come back, view it in a whole other way. This is what happened when we went to the moon. We go to the moon to explore the moon, and you look back, and we actually discovered Earth for the first time. Then you go back to Earth, and you have a whole completely different outlook. I think that's what Cosmos does best. So yes, Earth is front and center, but not until after we have stepped off of the Earth and then come back. Now you look at it afresh, and now we can deliver the messages and the principles on which becoming a better citizen would be based.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you. So that was, I think we got through one round with everybody. We have about minutes left, so for whoever is able to hang on the line, I think we can do one more kind of like a lightning round of questions, if that works for everybody.
I love lightning rounds.
Yeah, let's do a lightning round.
Okay.
All right, to ask a second question?
Absolutely. Neil, you posted a somewhat inspirational, it was inspirational, a post on your Instagram that you shared from Curtis Morgan about the kind of like how we're in dark times right now. And it seems that the coronavirus is pretty unprecedented. As a scientist, how would you recommend to the general public that we approach this really unique time in the world's history?
Sure. So let me just back up for a moment. I did post something on the coronavirus to Instagram, but I don't remember it being. Did you say Piers Morgan? Is that who you mentioned?
No, it was Curtis Morgan. He's a film director.
And what I don't remember referencing him. So maybe there are imposter accounts, Instagram accounts. Mine has a blue check and it has about 1.1 million followers. If that's there are other accounts where people just put stuff under my name. And
I hope I'm not following the wrong one.
Okay, take another look. A lot of my Instagram are just pretty pictures of things. Most of my commentary, which occasionally lands on Instagram, is all put onto my Twitter account. So if you're interested in where I'm commenting on the world, that's the center point for it. But getting back to the larger issue with regard to this virus that we are confronting, though I'm not a virologist, what I can say is that to me this is a great experiment going on in real time. Can the world say to itself, we have a common enemy? That enemy is not each other. The enemy is this invader to our species. It's a virus. And all the other reasons we would find to kill each other because of skin color or who we worship or what line in the sand you happen to live on, across whatever line you live on, all these differences really look petty compared with confronting a common viral enemy. And the cooperation necessary, because we all travel. That's one of the great features of modern civilization. There are no pockets of people living unto themselves anymore. We all communicate practically to every corner of the planet. And so, to me, this is an experiment in whether people understand the importance of listening to scientists, in this case, medical professionals, because there comes a time when you don't have the luxury to pick and choose what you want to believe and reject what you don't want to believe simply because it conflicts with your politics or your culture or your religion or your ideology. So it's an experiment. And if we come through this on the other side, it's because people listen to the advice of science professionals on this. That's how I view it.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Neil. Dana from the Koalition, would you like to ask a second question?
Yes, absolutely. Can you talk about, as an editor, there are a lot of different topics and things that I know that you want to discuss when it comes to the show Cosmos, but what is entertaining and what is educational? What is that fine balance that ultimately ends up making an episode?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that is something that we confronted every minute of every creative attempt, right? There is, okay, here's a really great idea we want to convey, but how are we going to show this? We don't know how we're going to show this, and if we do, we might fail. But can I still talk about it? Should I still talk about it? But then you're just watching me speak, and that's not fun. So certain story arcs needed just simple narrative to bridge other story arcs that have the visual interest. So at all times, there's a triage going on between, can this work visually? Then we don't need heavy explanation because the visuals carry it. Does this require an explanation? How can the visuals help it? Supplement it rather than be the main thing. And then with the visual, then can the intensity of the music that comes along with it, can that carry your emotions so that we can get you from one story arc to another? All of this came together for it. And everybody is making this judgment at all times. Is this working scientifically, educationally, visually, musically? And on top of that, we're not just teaching you. We want it to land within you in a way that compels you to want to stand up and make a better world, to reach for the possible worlds that we offer. And that affects the stories. There's some really great science stories out there, but that don't have this kind of compelling urge to make you stand up at the end of them. So they're on the cutting room floor. And the great science, make a great documentary of science, but it didn't pass the cosmos threshold of what it takes to influence the viewer in a way that does not come across as being preachy. So yes, this was a continual investment of the balance of these forces and elements.
Great. Thanks, Neil. Nick from Tech News World, did you have another question you wanted to ask?
Yes. You mentioned in Cosmos the importance of getting people together in cities to exchange ideas and to share different cultural backgrounds. Of course, over the centuries, we've had many advances in travel technology, interstate highways and airplanes and all that sort of thing, but we're still living pretty isolated for the most part and fragmented and tribally. And I'm wondering what you think of technology like Hyperloop in terms of bringing people on the planet closer together and creating more of a planetary identity.
So there's a lot going on in that question. I want to unpack it and try to do that in a lightning round sort of way. So the Hyperloop would replace other ways of transportation other than the airplane. Okay, the Hyperloop is not going 600 miles an hour. So the airplane will still be faster than the Hyperloop. So you would not take a Hyperloop from New York to LA, whereas I can get on a plane and cover that in 4 hours, 4.5 hours going west to east. So the fact is, most people in the world today live in cities, and that number doesn't look like it's shifting. And that's a very big change from what was around 100 years ago when, 2 out of 5 people were farmers, and the farmland was where people were scattered unto. Okay, so cities are still there. And the good thing about cities is, in a very short interval of space and time, you can be exposed to very different ideas from you because it's where people come historically to trade. If you're a trader, you would come from that compass direction, which is different from this other compass direction where somebody else came from. And the weather is different, the culture is different, the religion is different, the learning tactics are different, and you sit at the same table, exchange those ideas. Civilization advances swiftly when that happens. Advances meaning discoveries are made for the greater good of all. That's what I mean by advances. Okay, now, the technology that has come upon us, specifically the internet, has had an opposite effect. Who would have thought? The opposite effect is you have an idea that might be a little fringy. In a normal situation, you would confront others that would demonstrate to you that that was a fringy idea. Someone at the coffee lounge, someone at your school, someone in the street, in the park. And then that idea would wither on the vine. But what the internet has done has allowed you to find anyone else in the world with that same fringy idea, giving you false confidence that you're onto something, that you've got a truth that no one else knows about. And anytime someone conflicts with your truth, you go find other people that continue to agree with you. And they feed your ideas rather than challenge your ideas. This is how and why we have an entire community of flat earthers out. They have tribalized. So the internet has tribalized them in ways that gives the opposite effect of what it means for everyone to live in a city. So I don't have a solution for that. I don't know what to do other than to train people before they get on the internet what's going on, to inoculate themselves against charlatans who are out there just trying to convert them into ways that do not have their own health, wealth, or intellectual growth as a priority.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Lauren from GearBrain, did you have a follow-up question?
Yes, thank you. So in a lightning round, I know this is a big question, but just sort of hoping I can ask it anyways, but I know for a short answer. What would be the key invention, the key discovery we would need to find to have true human exploration beyond our solar system?
Oh, warp drive. We would need warp technology, or to travel through wormholes. Without it, there is a mismatch of the life expectancy of human physiology and the time it takes to travel those distances. So take a snail, for example. You can run the calculation. If a snail started in San Francisco in 1849, when the gold rush occurred, it would, I think, just now be getting to Chicago to announce that. Okay? Well, okay, that's a really stupid example, but the fact is, a snail communicating or traveling between Los Angeles and Chicago is not commensurate with what a snail is. So it just doesn't work. It's not, and so just give up on it, unless the snail can invent some other way to do this, like an airplane. Okay? In fact, the snail doesn't have to invent an airplane. Nature has to invent another life form that can invent an airplane. Oh, that way, a virus can cross the Pacific Ocean. Oh my gosh. Now, so the virus didn't have to invent the airplane. It just needed humans to. And now the virus is much more successful simply because we have made it so. So that's interesting. So let's get back to space. How are we going to go to another star system? Would we get alien technology to help us? That would be like humans putting a virus on an airplane unwittingly. That's one way. Or we just have to be really, really, really clever, not only scientifically but engineeringly, about how to find warp holes through the space-time. And a quick moment in my life, I was in the Charlotte, North Carolina airport. I had to go from a big plane to a little plane, and I swear it was like a 2-mile walk through the airport. It was like, and I had heavy thing, and it was like by the time I got there, I thought I'd be clever, and I tweeted. I said, "Can't wait till we have wormholes." In that way, all gates would be adjacent to each other, right? That's what a wormhole would do. And then someone cleverer than I was tweeted back, "Dr. Tyson, the day we have wormholes, you won't need airports." It was like, whoa, of course. So, yeah, just fortunately we have telescopes that can bring information from other star systems to us. But to visit them is really out of the picture. Unless we figure out how to live for 1 billion years, then so what if it takes 100 million years to cross the galaxy? You're alive for much more than that. That could be what it requires.
Thank you so much.
Guys, and just to flag, we've got about 5 minutes left. We've got 2 more questions coming, I think. So, Sajida from Comic Beat, did you want to ask a second question?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Kelly. Dr. Neil, who are the top 3 fictional or non-fictional characters from comics or movies or TV shows who you think would love Cosmos?
Okay. I think Batman would love Cosmos. He's human, and so and he's learned. There are many times we've seen him in his library reading, and he cares about technology, although he's not as clever about that as Tony Stark. I was recently got into one of those kind of fights, and I modified something I had said earlier. I said Iron Man beats Batman every day, okay? And because Iron Man builds all his own stuff, okay? But then I said, no, I have to change that. I have to modify that. Iron Man beats Batman, but Bruce Wayne beats Tony Stark because Bruce Wayne is physically fit, right? And Bruce Wayne knows martial arts. Tony Stark doesn't. So that is I think for me, that was an important revelation, contrasting the technological accoutrements that make them superheroes versus what they've actually accomplished physically as human beings. So I think Bruce Wayne would be very interested in watching Cosmos. Add to that,
the other two?
What's that?
Or do you have other two on the list?
Yeah. So I'm saying I would add to that. I'd lean towards the Marvel universe in general in this regard because they are many of the characters, a few accepted, of course, like Thor, but they started out as scientists or in a science type situation, and there's the Hulk, that he's a medical doctor. So I think those who were regular people would be most enchanted by Cosmos because it is designed to influence your outlook as a regular person. And most of the superheroes in the Marvel universe started out as regular people who were curious in whatever was their field of investigation. So I happen to like the Doctor Strange. I like his powers. I like his commitment. Also a medical doctor, of course. And who else there? Oh, gotta love Wonder Woman. Okay, she's smart and talented, and I think she could kick back with Cosmos as well.
Nice. Thank you.
Thanks,
okay,
guys.
But of course, that's going back to the DC universe to get her for that. Okay, make that clear. Okay. All right.
Last question. Some film. Did you have a second?
Oh, by the way, does she know? Do you know that I met Superman in the comics? Does she know that? Do you know that?
No.
So Action Comics 14. Superman visits me at the Hayden Planetarium. Best day of my life in the comics.
Well, thank you for sharing it.
Yes, it's maybe 6 years ago. Action Comics 14. Check it out.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. All right, and final question, Sonia. Did you have one more?
Yeah. I can ask this quickly. Neil, I'm just wondering how effective you think film and television are at how and why, I guess, at maybe communicating science and perhaps changing people's minds or perspectives, as you've alluded to.
Yeah, that's a really good question because I've spent a lot of time wondering this, and I remembered when I started getting recognized in the street. This is maybe when the numbers went from like one a month to like one a week, random people in the street. I would ask them, well, how do you know who I am? What is it? And 8 out of 10 people, 9 out of 10 people, as they accumulated, would say, "Oh, I saw a YouTube of you, or I saw you on this documentary." And I had written several books by then, and none of them was it by books, and none of them knew me by virtue of the books. So I realized. And now it's like hundreds a day who would recognize me if I didn't go in some kind of incognito. But when I do, still this happens, it is through some visual medium. So I concluded that most people are not readers. Doesn't mean they can't read. It just means they don't. So my most potent way to reach them will be via some video product, be it in a documentary or in a YouTube video or in as host of Cosmos. So while I still care deeply about what I write and how I write it and who reads it and whether it gets out there, there's a whole part of me that is specially invested in reaching people visually, and not only by my manner and how I gesture when you're watching me on the screen, but what I say and how I say it and whether you're going to come back for more. All of this. And so it's a tacit recognition. Now, I don't want to admit that because as an academic, it's in books and you need the academic books. And, I think of, I have a huge library and I do a lot of reading. But that I have to recognize that's not the world. And if I want to reach the world, I can't just say, read my book. I need another way to reach you. And by the way, add to this other media, such as Twitter, such as Instagram, such as TikTok, okay? Open up a TikTok account recently. And I'm still getting the hang of it because it's shifted young, but they shouldn't not be in did I get my double negative right there? That demographic shouldn't be excluded from who I'm trying to reach in bringing the universe down to earth. So these are multiple platforms that, if you do it well or do it right, will require different keys to unlock how you would use them to communicate with the public. And so I've had people say, your Star Talk, I love your Star Talk, but why don't just make it just you? I don't need the comedian, just you talk. And I say, no, some people enjoy the comedian. I enjoy the comedian. Okay, so maybe Star Talk is not for you. If you just want me, I wrote a textbook called Welcome to the Universe, co-authored with two professors I taught that class with at Princeton. If you want to get all in, go there. And so there are many different platforms that I have put out there for whoever that demographic is. So my answer to you is yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, it's great.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Video works. Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.